Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sitting down and talking to me.
Thanks for giving us your time. So I got a bunch of questions to ask you. Some of these we can just laugh off, but it would be nice to hear if we could get some of your insights.
I will do my absolute best.
Okay, so Blaze asks, what didn't make the cut for the Dread Moon that you wish had, and why is it the Sir Ragnar Mini?
All right.
Carnival.
First part of the question, we concepted the mechanics for sentries. We wanted to see if we could generate monsters that could open doors and see what that would do in terms of the complexity of Zargon's strategy. Wasn't quite ready for prime time. We turned Zargon a little OP in ways that made some of the playtests a little complicated. But it was a great idea. I like the theme of it. I'm not going to give up on it quite yet. What the question about Sir Ragnar is, what was it again? Oh, you mean in terms of the miniature? Like, did we not make a sculpt?
The characters there. So
Yep. Yeah. So, spoiler: Sir Ragnar is in Rise of the Dread Moon. I really, I guess, got hung up on this idea that in the European text that it was referenced that he was a traitor.
yes.
And it felt like it was a narrative that had some depth and some potential, and kind of this story of Mage of the Mirror and Elathorn not feeling complete in the Mage of the Mirror, and this idea that Sir Ragnar was out there, and what was he doing, and what was he up to, gave me just a really good narrative tool to like connect the dots back to Zargon in a very direct way. It made a lot of thematic sense to kind of make him a reoccurring character. That he was like this, liaison to the evil and the nefarious machinations of what's happening in Elathorn. So I wanted to bring him back in that way. But we had a lot of conversations about like what makes the cut in terms of a heart sheet token versus sculpt. And where were players going to find the most value out of what's inside the box? And so I know a lot of the fans were like, well, where's my Sir Ragnar sculpt? Where's my figure? And what we ultimately came up with was that the Dread Wraith, Dread Spectre kind of thing was going to give Zargons more opportunity to introduce more character, more homebrew, more potential, more versions of something new than essentially just another Dread Warrior, which is ultimately what Sir Ragnar is at this point. Kind of bending his knee to Zargon, he's essentially like a named Dread Warrior in a way. And so that's a much easier proxy, it's a much easier thing for kind of other ways of kind of incorporating that in than having this really unique double base Dread Spectre concept that's going to let them kind of do more mechanics, new spells, new abilities, things like that. So like at the end of the day, we felt like that's probably going to get more value than like a Dread Warrior with no helmet on. And does that mean we won't make a Sir Ragnar at some point? No, but in our kind of where are we going, where are we taking, and when we have to make the difficult decisions of what we can put in the box, it made more sense to us to give Zargon something they could do a little bit more with than a Sir Ragnar.
I want to say that I completely understand. I'm on your side with this. As far as using your imagination and just taking one piece to represent many different characters is something we've always done. But I think it was more people were hoping that, oh, this is like the perfect excuse since he's on the box as a character that you could have just shoehorned him in, which you did with the Knight in a way, which I thought was really cool. I think a lot of people were wanting that Guardian Knight, and that can lead into another question, but
That's okay.
Was it a toss-up between the two, or was it kind of a...
Oh, between the Guardian Knight and Sir Ragnar?
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
It was very early in the process that we decided to solve the Commander of the Guardian Knight Hero Collection issue, that the Guardian Knight was going to be the playable character in Rise of the Dreadmoon. That was an absolute very early, this is what we're doing, no question. We want to make sure those fans feel like, in a way, they can be completists, have all that opportunity, and have all that. And that was why we also decided that we were not going to make any modifications to the Guardian Knight in Rise of the Dreadmoon. He was going to play mechanically, rule-wise, the exact same as the one that was released as a promotional item in the beginning.
Well, now I love the helmet too.
Yeah, well, that was part of it too. Is it separates the sculpt, so if you have the original one, you can still feel like I really have a treasure here with the Commander of the Guardian Knight. It's a different sculpt. That ambiguity of the helmet is like a fun play that also allowed us to put other stuff in the box instead of doing the male-female kind of comparison. So we kind of made it kind of gender ambiguous by putting the helmet on. It was a good kind of test of what we could do there, right? So yeah, that was just it answered a few questions for us, right?
Well, and without jumping in, well, I guess people that listen to me know the spoilers already, but the way the end of Rise of the Dreadmoon shows Sir Ragnar, it's like there could be another thing. It's like the trial of Sir Ragnar is next.
Of course, right? That was the fun.
Oh, he got away again.
We absolutely had the conversations of, does the jail wagon make it all the way back to the realm, right? There's a lot of opportunity there.
He was shot trying to escape, and then they take the helmet off, and it's not him. It's like,
but I mean, I know a lot of the fans were kind of pointed with like, hey, they teased these turns of Sir Ragnar that insinuates that they were going to make a sculpt. It actually doesn't work that way. We'll do turns on characters because we want to include them into essentially our canon, our trademarks, our brand Bible, all that stuff. We had to make those turns to basically put them on the front of the box. And that doesn't necessarily mean in our process formulaically that it yields a miniature sculpt or anything like that. But it's necessary for our documentation and our world building to create that material, and that's what we shared with the community.
So kind of like in the comic book world, how they have to make the cover just to establish that that's your property.
Yeah, that's just it. If they have a comic book artist working at Marvel, they're working on a new Black Panther, there's a new suit, right? Somebody is going to provide that comic book artist with turns of that new suit as reference material to do the comic book cover, right? What we shared were essentially the turns that established that costuming, and then the comic book artist would in theory create the dynamic energy poses that you think of on the front of a comic book cover. So it is an important step in doing something like a sculpt, but it does not say definitively that's turning into a sculpt. I think there was probably people who just said, "Oh, if I see these turns, it must mean there's a sculpt on the way."
There's an element of wishful thinking in there, and I think with the HasLab campaign saying, the version of this character or whatever, set that in a lot of people's minds. And I understand that, you turn the box around, it doesn't show a Sir Ragnar miniature. And it's like, well, why would you guys try to fool us during the production and then because people come to it later, they look at the box and they say, okay, he's not there. Thematically, he's there, but as an actual plastic, he isn't. But he could be in the future.
Yeah, again, it's not an attempt to kind of fool the community. It was more of, we know the community's endeared to Sir Ragnar just being a named character in the lore, right? And for the super fans, a lot of you guys had optics into that European narrative, right? So we knew when we did that it was going to create just a lot of conversation within the community. Hey, what do they mean Sir Ragnar's a traitor? That's not true. Oh wait, bro, you haven't read the European one. You don't understand. This has been a thing for 30 years, right? We just wanted the conversation, the community to do all the, the buzz and debate and, and do that. That was kind of the idea, right, of like teasing the beginning of Rise of the Dreadmoon. We knew dropping that bomb in a way was just going to let the fans get engaged. And that was really the effort at that point. Like, we knew it would be like conversation within conversation within conversation within the community of like, who is Sir Ragnar? What do you mean he's a traitor? What are you talking about? Like, I mean, anybody that's played HeroQuest has probably made it 3 quests in and therefore knows who Sir Ragnar is. Right. So it was an opportunity to kind of get everybody engaged, chatting, talking.
So you're starting the conversation, not ending it, I think, is the key. Because a lot of people, I think, for whatever reason, they want like the definitive, like closing the door, this is the canonical like explanation, as opposed to saying, well, and now on that cliffhanger, you're going to make your own story, or you're going to fill in the details. Why did he do it? You know.
I agree 100%. The reality of how we've designed HeroQuest in this kind of new era of HeroQuest is a lot of open-ended storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's because if the game inherently is kind of structured around the idea that fans can introduce their own mechanics, their own homebrew, their own narration. A gentleman earlier today showed me that he had created custom cards for every one of his kids. And that is what endears these kids to play HeroQuest, is like they can see themselves in the game, quite literally. That is why we all loved the game as when we were kids, is that we made it our own. And so to give a really tight, super structured, linear narrative flies in the face of what fans actually do with the game. So by design, we make sure the narrative has gaps. You know, it doesn't dot the I's and cross the T's in some places, so that fans can fill in the blanks. And I know, I get it. Like, I want to know how the story ends sometimes. I want somebody to tell me. But for so many players, they want the opportunity to do that themselves. So I think there's enough substance and depth in the material that we're sharing out that for fans who just want to read it out loud and move on to the next quest, it's there. And for the fans that want to build their own stories and tell their own tales and add a degree of light role play into their experience, it's the platform to do that.
That's really helpful. That's really useful, because I think that question gets asked over and over again. It's more like some people are wanting. I'm thinking back to the Dave Morris novels, where it's like he gives a presentation of like the HeroQuest world. But even in that case, he's giving a narrative, and then the second part of the novel is a choose your own adventure, and then the third part of the novel is a quest. So it's still like these prototypes, these archetypes of characters could be anything. This is just maybe one possible adventure they had. It's not the one and only story.
I mean, ultimately, you know, having talked to Stephen Baker a couple times about this specific topic, I mean, the direction of making HeroQuest in the beginning, back in the late 80s, was to provide that degree of light roleplay. People may have been intimidated by the kind of golden era of roleplay. You know, Dungeons and Dragons was really starting to hit its stride at that point and kind of working its way into like the zeitgeist. But it could have been intimidating for many people who are like...
It definitely was for me. Right? And I saw HeroQuest and I was like, oh, I get that. That's easy.
Exactly. And so for people like, I'm not going to sit down at a table and abstractly attempt to tell the campfire story with my friends, and you know, that was a leap for many people. But to put down what looked like a traditional board, what looked like traditional dice, but the theme matched up with the cool stuff that was going on in the world and played into some of the things that I think for us led us into things like the high fantasy admiration for Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings and things like that. Well, HeroQuest provided that, but it was trying to factor in this idea of, yeah, I still kind of want to make it my own. I still want to role play a little bit, and the degree in which I do that is kind of up to me. I could do a lot of it. I could do a little. My friend can make all his Zargon choices in voice, or he could not, right? I could just say I want to roll my dice and keep going, or I can say I want to swing my broadsword and crack it over that orc skull. It was completely up to your friends what you ended up doing.
Yeah. And I got to say, when I'm Zargon, which is most of the time, I really appreciate that when, you know, I have a new player in our group and they just do something wild that I wasn't expecting. It's like, oh great. You know, that knight is going to throw away his shield and just go off on his own, you know, looking for treasure. It's like, that's his character. That's what he wants to do. It's like, that's great.
That's why we thought Betrayal was a great fit into the portfolio as well. In fact, Avalon Bill and I just came back from a live stream on Gen Con. We were actually talking about this very thing, that for us, Betrayal is that game where if you're a gamer or you've got a few gamers in the crew, but you have other friends who don't necessarily identify as gamers, or they're almost coming over for the Friday night game night for the first time, it's one of those games that you can put in front of them, and like their degree of comfort in role play and engagement in strategy gaming can be all over the place, and yet you can find some commonality in playing that game. And I reference in the stream, I'm like, it's just like HeroQuest, that same thing. You could be a super fan of high fantasy and find a lot of value in HeroQuest, sit down with someone who's never played a strategy game in their lives and the only thing they've ever played is Monopoly, and somehow be able to sit down and play that game together. There's something just beautiful about that accessibility kind of logic, and that's a lot of what our kind of North Star is on Avalon Hill.
I'm going to have to try that game before I go home this time.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and there's if you're really into like cinematic horror and things like that, like every trope, every archetype, it's so funny to do it.
Oh, that's the best.
Yep, and I find because of that and the fact that like in the core game there's like 50 different haunts, that people create their own moments, and that's a lot of the conversation at Gen Con. People come up, they say, I love Betrayal. Like my friend and I, we were playing this, this haunt triggered, you know, like, you know, I had this friend over, it was their first time, we talk about it, it's been like 20 years now, like it's just really beautiful little moments that come up that endear people to that game the same way that happens with HeroQuest.
That's great, that's great. Well, let's get back into some more of these questions here.
Go for it.
All right. So, I missed this completely until someone told me about it. Steve RS 2000 says that at the end of Into the Northlands in the companion app, there's a little survey. It says, like, did you like the animal companion? I didn't even know about that. So he's asking, are there going to be other surveys, and were the results good? Are there going to be other animal friends popping up in other quests, or?
Yeah, so when we uploaded Into the Northlands into the app, we had the very same conversation. At that point, the Discord had been several months old. We were finding really good fan engagement through social media with the community, and we were collecting a lot of data. And it was clumsy though. It was very analog, how we were kind of pulling screen grabs down from Discords, having meetings about like, hey, we saw this 5 times, like that kind of thing. So when we talked back with the app team about it, they were like, yo, we can put a survey into the app like super easy. We're like, great, because this Into the Northlands thing is going to introduce a couple mechanics. We would love to see how people respond to that. And you know, if they kind of enjoy that engagement and want more of a formal way of providing that material. And so we threw the survey in, it got good results. A lot of people answered it, and it just became another tool in the toolbox of like how we collect the data on what the fans want, and we'll just continue to do that where we can.
Okay, so that makes me think, all right, I need to go in there and do it now because...
Oh, yeah, because you want your vote to go.
Right. Well, and I think I just had this momentary flash, and I think a few other people did too. It was like, okay, we're panicking like usual. Okay, if you guys are only looking at the companion app, you're missing out on all the people who take one look at it and go, I like Beans Argon, I don't need this. And you're maybe going to get a skewed view based on just what a few people are looking at. Because if you look at my app data, you're going to go, this guy is just like messing around. He's not even finishing quests most of the time. I mean, there was like 3 times I had a pretty good experience with it, but most of the time I'm just not giving you useful data.
Yeah, it's a dev tool. It's not the dev tool, right? Just like I said, like the Discord server does function as an input device for us. And even though you think of Hasbro and you think of big giant toy and game corporation, like a lot of process and that kind of thing, the irony is when we get good feedback on something like the Discord, we have a meeting about it. And so it's funny to think about, for fans at least, maybe that it's like, oh my God, if I throw all this down on the Discord, suddenly there's 10 people on the Avalon Hill team sitting in a meeting room talking about what I said on the Discord and debating what we want to do with that commentary. That's a real thing. And that's actually something we kind of pride ourselves on. We promised everybody we wanted to be engaged with the community, and we wanted to make these games, kind of by us, for us. And I kind of promised last year, I said, look, like if the fans are willing to work with us, we'll work for them. And like things like Rise of the Dreadmoon is an example of that. We got to a point where we said, look, we're collecting a lot of good data, we're hearing a lot of feedback, we're pushing out a lot of reissues of old quest packs, but what we're not doing right now is capitalizing on some of the good ideas the community has, the things they want to see.
Yes.
So, fine, we're going to pivot, we're going to stop what we're doing for a moment, we're going to issue a new quest pack that's never been done before. That doesn't mean that we've given up on making sure that fans get all the quest packs that they wanted growing up. It just means I'm mixing up the line plan so that we can do right by the fans and the things they want and get that out to them, and we'll just keep doing it as long as the fans keep buying it.
Nice. And I really like the whole alchemy mechanic in Rise of the Dreadmoon, and obviously I wasn't the first one to come up with it. Other people had similar systems before, but I thought it was really cool that something that I kind of do anyway is now official, or at least something that can be used.
Yeah. Again, it's, it is taking good feedback, really play testing through it, making sure it thematically holds together cohesively. And like I said, we'll keep doing it. The fans can keep throwing the feedback our way, and we'll keep analyzing the material. We'll keep making the games, and keep HeroQuest around for a long time.
Excellent. And I should probably move a little faster through these. So Wizards of Morkar, the Dwarf quest pack, the Wizard quest pack, are they coming?
I can neither confirm nor deny, right? At the end of the day, if there is any question of whether or not Avalon Hill has the rights to those, we absolutely do, right? They are definitely within our scope of possibility. Fans are just gonna have to wait and see.
Okay, I knew you were gonna say that, but thank you for putting that on the record. So Jacer asks, am I getting a card for the ferrets? Okay, for the Beastmaster.
Yep, that is so true. We did promise a ferret. We're gonna have to figure out where we slide that in at some point for Jace.
He's super creative.
Yep.
Nightbird asks, when is the Blind Captain coming out?
When are we gonna make Nightbird as an actual playable miniature. We'll just have to see how much of a kind of fan favorite that character grows into being, based on their placement in a couple of the lore videos now. Now that they're canon, I mean, it's hard to deny they exist in the world. It's just where's the right place we're going to eventually put them, but we'll see how that goes.
All right, excellent. GA3680 says, we love how you're both paying homage to the historical expansions, both American and European, as well as releasing brand new ones. If and when you get around to Wizards of Morcar, will you be looking to increase it to a 10-quest campaign like most of the others? Many thanks.
Yep, so again, I mean, wait and see on what we do, when we do it, how we do it, if we do it. But, I mean, yeah, I want to make sure if we do Wizards of Morcar that it's right. It feels like it's a good quality product, that it feels like it's got the right level of completion. I think a couple of those quest packs, a couple of the things that we haven't quite done yet, different levels of how many quests were in them, the quality of those quests, where they can even complete expansions at that point. That's a lot of really good conversation around those that has to be had. Those decisions have to be made. But that's all TBD.
Right, yeah, and I wish I was more in touch with like the European HeroQuest fans, because I'm really familiar with the American side of things and how like broken a lot of people thought Frozen Horror was, but they still wanted it. Mage of the Mirror, you made the tweaks and everything, but I don't know what the opinion is on the European packs, and like, was there a lot of negativity? Was there a lot of fan fixes for some of the things, or did people just want it the same, preserved, I
mean, there's a few that we've kind of zeroed in on a few places.
Oh, good.
Like, I know there's some other YouTube influencers like Amalgamesh who the sanctity of 10 body point ogres was a thing, and but does it really make for good gameplay when you're just sitting there punching the punching bag over and over and over and nobody's moving? They're just rolling dice turn after turn after turn, trying to just drill down on a bunch of body points. Is that still fun?
But surely that last ogre should be 10, right?
Right.
I kind of agree with him on that one.
Yep. The level of difficulty, I know with Frozen Horror, I like, hugs are hard. They're dangerous, very dangerous hugs. That's why we kind of introduced that kind of alternative mechanic to dealing with smaller tables of players. So we'll just continue to, analyze the things that, are they good? Even though they might be original mechanics, are they good mechanics? Do they make for a fun game? At the end of the day, we want it to be fun, even if it's, it's nostalgic, but it's broken. Is that something we should fix? We've got the possibility, and I get that there's a community out there that's like, yeah, don't touch the thing, leave it exactly as is. But there's also a whole community of new fans and potential new fans that we want them to have a good time too, because the more people that play, the longer we're going to keep running HeroQuest.
It's very true. Well, and I suppose there's always the fallback position of the hardcores like me can always just play it the way we know is best.
Yep.
And the new people are going to find out what they like best, your way, our way, or some new way.
Yep. Homebrew.
Very good, very good. Okay, any possibility of a standalone monster or dice pack? Okay, so Ribby, I think, is commenting on the hero collections. I think Covert Nerd said this too, is that are we going to start getting other little packs that are not necessarily heroes, but other things we could use?
Well, I mean, anybody who's at the convention this week, there's some pretty beautiful dice that are being given away every time somebody buys it.
I saw those.
Yeah. So it's a good test and learn to understand what people find value in. So kind of bringing the bringing that out at the con is actually an opportunity for us to kind of collect that perspective, and that's why it's here this weekend. That's the experiment. We're kind of playing with it to see how fans are endeared to something like that. Yeah. Right.
Those new dice, yeah, they're carved very deeply. I think that was one of the complaints I had with the HasLab dice, is they were kind of, the quality of them weren't very good. I mean, they look good, but when you look closely, you'd see there was little imperfections. But these look very clear, very sharp, and they've got some interesting colors. So, yeah, I know not everybody collects dice. I mean, you got to have good ones in the box, but that'll definitely appeal to some people. I'm not sure about the dice rolling scroll or whatever, but I guess I see other people at some other tables using similar devices.
Yep, that is an element that you tend to see in some individuals who buy very premium dice. And again, this was kind of like a little bit of a test and learn, a little bit of our own kind of survey. You know, we can have some conversation afterwards when people see it and people hold it and people play with it, if it's something they want to see more often. And that's kind of what we're doing here.
I like that. Rather than just waiting, well, what do you want? Well, here's the product. What do you think?
And again, that's why we're kind of giving it out for free when people come and buy HeroQuest at the booth, because we just want to get it out there, get into people's hands, then have conversations with them on the other side once they get a chance to play with it.
Oh yeah, thank you for doing that. I'll definitely have to do some videos on that when I get the chance. All right, so, okay, we already got that question. Okay, so with the Dwarf and Wizard packs, so with the Dwarf and Wizard packs, I mean, you guys have all the draft notes and your own ideas and everything, but are you going to be using the basis of those unreleased quest packs that hardly anybody knows about, or are you just going to take the concept and do something completely new, or not sure yet?
See, I think because those were unreleased, I don't personally consider them canon, right? That's something that the super fans have endeared to themselves in a way, because they didn't kind of have anything else over the last.
Imagined what they could have been.
Exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's real or final or play tested, for that matter, right? A lot of the times, the draft rules like that are usually not play tested, and that means the balance could be way off. It means like there just could be a lot of incomplete stuff, or in a way, mechanically it kind of goes nowhere, or it doesn't offer anything new, right? It was just more of.
Oh, kind of like, maybe I'm wrong on this, like Stephen Baker's original drafts for HeroQuest. Like, we don't have those, and if we got them, we would just go, oh, well, this was a work in progress. This wasn't the final.
Or it's like completely broken, for that matter, and Steve knew that and went in a different direction when he was creating the final product, right? Just because it was, you know, Steve's notebook doesn't necessarily mean it should make it all the way to retail. That's part of Steve's process, right? He probably had 15 different drafts, probably play tested it 500 times. Like, there were a lot of decisions, a lot of conversations along the way, you know. Again, just because it was written down, I don't know if that necessarily means that we all want to see it as a product. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we want to do the things the fans want. And we have a great, vocal, engaged community of super fans that we appreciate. But there is another lens, like I said, where it's like, what's the right product for everybody you're looking at around us? As Kurgan and I look in two directions, and there's about, I don't know, 3,000 people around us as we sit here.
This is just the tip of the iceberg as far as gamers. Well, I think for me, I would love to see like a little historical collection, like a little snapshot of a diary. Like, what were those conversations like in 89 or 88 or whenever it was? But yeah, as opposed to saying like, okay, well, here's draft one in a box. Yeah, I'm not sure if that would work.
Yeah, and poor Steve, it's so funny, every time we have a conversation, he's trying to remember a random meeting that occurred 40 years ago. But I mean, again, it's a process, it's a team effort. I mean, you see it here, coming to the booth, like, there's not one person working on HeroQuest. It takes about 14 of us just on the core team, never mind all the other support staff that we have at Hasbro to help Avalon Hill kind of get to the finish line. So it takes a village.
Well, I'm learning so much more about that. I don't think I ever really thought this, but maybe I sort of assumed it's like someone has an idea for a game and it's like a lightning strike and they just write it all down and then it gets prototyped the next day and then it's done. And it's really nothing like that at all.
No, I mean, just going from initial concept to draft rules to alpha testing to beta testing to like instructions testing, like a lot changes in that process, and that takes a lot of people, a lot of input, a lot of discussion, and that's just rules. Never mind narrative, where that narrative leads. Does that make sense from like a IP world building kind of standpoint? Costing out the product, making sure
that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, making sure the components cost out to be the right price point that consumers are willing to pay. And it's an exercise in putting things in, taking things out, swapping things, and that process goes on through the entire testing process. Something doesn't test well, it comes out, something else goes in, right? Something doesn't cost out, that comes out, the rules change to accommodate it. That is just a process, that starts very early and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes until the 11th hour when we kind of force pencils down. And a lot changes in that. So to that point of like the secret notebook of rules, I mean, just Rise of the Dreadmoon probably changed, I don't know, 7 or 8 times as an overall experience just in the process of making it. Like I said in the beginning, we had sentries. They were hunting you through the streets of Elithorn. It was crazy. It was fun. It just didn't work.
Sure. Great. Wow. All right. So Luca Rock says, I doubt they will answer, or maybe it's out of their wheelhouse, but what's up with the inconsistent presentation of previews for new products? We're hungry for new products, so there's no reason to be so hesitant with sharing information. It'll be leaked out eventually anyway. I think his comment kind of goes back to the beginning of the changing strategy on dealing with the community and revealing products. So what would you say to?
Yeah, I'd say the other thing to note is Hasbro Avalon Hill, Wizards of the Coast, we're a manufacturing company, right? But we have our own internal marketing and sales teams, and then we also have all our external retailers and partners, right? Just the way the business works, a lot of things change along that way. How we unveil exclusive, reveals, who gets the content first, what retailers, what regions actually have product arrive in their distribution facilities. That's not all stuff Avalon Hill can control.
You had a theory that there was a dartboard and you throw it and whichever country hits it gets it.
Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't work like that at all. And it's very interesting. We're a global company, and our process is when we go to tool start and film on a product like a HeroQuest expansion, it automatically triggers another team in Canada, they're based out of Montreal, who does all the adaptations and translations for HeroQuest.
Okay.
And they receive all the English files, and that automatically puts in the system, we need a German one, a French one, like so on and so forth. And they have to start their process of doing the adaptations and translations for each one of them. That prioritization gets broken down again based on the orders that are coming in from the retailers. So for example, if France orders 60,000 units and Italy orders 10,000 units, it might be a situation where France gets theirs first. Or just by chance, as things move through the pipeline, if for some reason there was something wrong with the French version and it has to get fixed, the Italy version jumps ahead of it and the factory line. So now when they do the run, the Italy one got done before the French one, got put in boxes, put on pallets, put on trucks, put on ships, shipped to that country because of some unforeseen circumstance. You know, something went wrong on the line. Something didn't print correctly. There was some crazy typo we had to fix.
Because that actually happened.
Absolutely, it happens every day. And that might mean, for some strange reason, the Italy one is suddenly available 2 weeks before the French one. And that's just how it plays out.
Pause for a second.
The reality is, Avalon Hill being part of Hasbro,
Right.
we're going to go after the big bets.
Right.
And we only have so much staff, so much resources.
Right.
We're going to make certain calls. Right. But when we sit down with this diplomacy crew,
Right.
and you guys are like, look, we are diehard, passionate fans
yeah.
for this thing.
Absolutely.
We are dying for this thing to come back.
Yep.
That creates a really good conversation
Yeah.
back home.
Yep.
And we're like, look, we might not get to diplomacy for 5 years.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can work with our partners at Renegade, get that thing out the door, get it back in everybody's hands, bring that game back to retail, and they're capable of doing low quantities, right, and low runs that we honestly probably can't get to in the grand scheme of prioritization.
The size of your company, absolutely.
And that's where the conversation went with Access Allies Diplomacy Acquire. It was like, let's call our buddies over at Renegade. Let's make this happen. Let's get that stuff back. We know the fans exist, right? They can get it out there, you know, in the method that we got to for that fan community. Let's roll, right?
No, there's a lot of excitement behind the new release. You know, I was at Origins when Thomas had, you know, his things. Had a large turnout for diplomacy there. I followed Thomas over to WBC in Seven Springs, right? Most diplomacy players we've had in like a number of years, right? Had 4 boards, 3 boards, 4 boards, right? And so did a great job there as well. A lot of excitement about the product. Thomas is so super excited, you just can't, you know, help but feed off of him, right? Like the keychains, the hat, the t-shirts, right?
I know, well that's just it. So what happened was...
all these little things are exciting for everybody,
100%, right? That's what started it. Here at Gen Con last year, walking over to Lucas Oil Field, seeing you guys run the tournament, and I was sitting there up in the bleachers watching you guys.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm like, we have to do this. Going back home, back to headquarters, and being like, look at Thomas. Look what he's doing for this community. Look at those fans. I was down there with you guys for a moment.
Oh, I know. It's rare to find a Thomas, right?
I know.
He is so super excited and does a phenomenal job of organizing.
Well, I was down there, and you guys, you were initiating another round.
Yeah.
And when you did, somebody walked over to a laptop, started the chess clock. Everybody went cold, silent, like no talking. I was like, this is how passionate these fans are. Like, we gotta find a way to bring this back, right? So, I mean, that experience of being here last year and seeing that community play in Lucas Oil Field was like me racing back home to be like, all right, what are we doing to pull this off?
And that big wooden board, I mean, that's existed for close to 30 years. I was here in '98 when I won this diplomacy tournament. It was still that same big wooden board, right? Phenomenal colorization, different types of wood.
I know, he was so proud of that, this hand-built, one-of-a-kind board that only comes out once a year for the final game of the tournament. That is...
for our U.S. champion.
It is amazing. And I mean, you've got a crew over here in the other corner of Hall C that run these Access and Allies tournaments every single year. They got this beautiful little booth they built themselves, right? They are the first people in this hall every day. I'm an early bird. I roll in here at 7 a.m. and unlock the doors to this booth. Those guys are already here. They're already sitting there with their binders open, reading through who's playing that day. I'm like, again, if that's the community of these games, we have to be doing something for them. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, the relationship with a partner like Renegade is allowing us to do that. And I know the talk of the town today is the HeroScape news that Renegade's going to bring HeroScape back, right? It's all part of that conversation. It's all part of that plan, right? You know, like at the end of the
I
day,
want you guys to get your game too.
Yeah.
I'm more the
Oh,
Hero
yeah.
Escape thing.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
again,
yeah.
we promised last year at Gen Con we're bringing HeroScape back, right? Who's pushing the pencil and the logo on the bottom of the box doesn't matter as much as saying the fans are getting their game back.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. No, I appreciate that. You guys have done a great job, Avalon Hill and Hasbro, you know, putting attention where you can and where you can't do it yourselves, getting a partner like Renegade Games involved. That's great. We appreciate it. So no, I was here last year too and chatted with you a little bit, and so I was on that final board last year too. My son ended up winning that final board, but you know, I just want to stop by and say thank you, right? Appreciate the new games being put out, right? The new versions, and you know, everything.
No, I
So just
super
wanted to say
appreciate that.
thank you.
And again, that conversation of you coming to this booth afterwards,
yeah.
like I took that home with me.
No, I appreciate that.
I was like,
Yeah.
you got to understand that crew is walking halfway across Indianapolis,
Oh, yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
to come tell us how important this is.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't think we're all circling the wagons when we get home and talking about that stuff, that's exactly what we do.
We'd still prefer to be in this hall, but at least this year we're on the close end of Lucas Oil, right? We were in so many years in the far end, right? And there's like one tiny bathroom in the corner.
So
right?
for all Kurgan's listeners, like Gen Con is so sprawling,
Yeah.
it's like a 25-minute walk from one end of the con to the other, through like 6 halls, 5 escalators, underneath 4 city streets to like find the other end of the convention. So that's how big this place
He's not joking. This is my first time here, and I thought I'd seen everything, and then you told me about, oh, you've got to go even further, and it's like, yep, there's even more and more.
Yeah.
And this year you could truly say Gen Con is back. I mean, last year was a pretty good year, but you know, even just, I mean, for a Thursday, this place is back and packed like it had been before COVID. So,
Yeah, and we hang out, the Avalon Hill booth is in Hall D.
Yeah.
There's a huge sprawling hall. It's like a solid 3 football fields long. And a lot of the tables are set aside specifically for gamers to just buy their treasures, sit down with their friends and family, and just crack open the boxes and play. And that's what you actually see around the Avalon Hill booth, is just people kind of going off, buying their favorite treasures, sitting down and just breaking open that stuff and playing, and it's such a great experience.
Well, I do appreciate last year. I remember I told you about Thomas putting a lot of his own money in the past into the tournament. I do remember that you came down and gave him a nice set that if he wanted to, that he could sell to kind of get some money to keep going on with it. But then I know this year between Renegade Games and maybe yourselves as well, or maybe it's through them, that he's had a little bit of a budget to then even do more than what he's done. Right?
Yeah,
for
so
the players and
so
stuff.
for the Kurgan crew, what Robert's referring to is I had an unopened Mythic that was still mint in box that I brought over to Thomas, who runs the diplomacy games here at Gen Con, knowing that Robert had mentioned that Thomas was funding the tournament for years by himself. I actually offered up the mint condition Mythic Hero Quest as an opportunity for him to auction off, sell on eBay, do something to help finance the diplomacy work that the team had been doing over there. And it was one more way to kind of unite the tribes a little bit, get another Mythic out there and help Thomas out with everything that he's been doing.
That's a cool gesture, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I appreciate everything you've
Great,
done,
thank
Chris.
you, Robert.
I wanted to stop by and say hey and thank you again, and
Awesome.
appreciate everything that you guys have been doing with your partners. And I can't tell you, Thomas is even more excited than he's normally been, right? Like I can't tell you, I get, you know, updates, you know, on my phone all the time, like, oh, look at these key rings, oh, look at these stickers, oh, look at this.
Oh,
right?
he sends me
Oh,
pictures
do you
of his
get all that
kids
too?
with
Oh,
like,
yeah.
he's got the
World War I hats. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I get it all. It's beautiful.
Got huge plastic maps that he went
Yep.
out and had made and stuff too for
Yep.
Big Bays. He created a Lego board all by himself that puts it on. So I
Yeah.
just played on the Lego board today with Lego pieces.
Yeah. So when the crew gets back together down there this week, I mean, you should throw high fives to each other because it's you who brought diplomacy back.
I will certainly
Right.
let them know.
Awesome.
But again, I want to thank you very
Great.
much for everything.
Thank you, Robert.
Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Great seeing you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Oh, that was beautiful. And that's what it's all about, I think. All right, great. So moving forward, so Lee of Covert Nerds says, well, he's asking the question you get a lot about, will the other Mythic figures be released? So Mentor, Sir Ragnar,
Well, I've mentioned a few times at the con, people ask that question quite often. There are some figures in the Mythic that we specifically marked in the crowdfunding campaign as exclusive to the crowdfunding campaign, right? The Crypt of Perpetual Darkness quest pack, Sir Ragnar, the Witch Lord. There are some that we just in that instance they will most likely not come back, right? There are other things in the Mythic that were not specifically marked as exclusive that have the potential to come back in some way. You know, and
Yeah.
Intergalactic Patrick, broke into my office and might have sent a video of a certain box that maybe he, snuck a picture of in my office, and maybe that's a hint to things to come. So we shall see.
Analyze that very carefully. Well, and I know there's the whole like collector versus mainstream fan debate or whatever about all these things, but I think for me it's more like the concept of it, like a Witch Lord figure, not necessarily that one.
Yeah, well, again, the Guardian Knight's a good example of it. We never wanted people who were able to get the Commander of the Guardian Knight to feel like their collectible lost value when Rise of the Dread Moon came out. And so changing the sculpt, changing the art on the cards, that was a requirement to the process to make sure if someone held up a Commander of the Guardian Knight, they can still feel like they have this amazing collectible that is near and dear to them and, has whatever value they apply to it, but that for fans who didn't get it, they can play the game the same way, same mechanics, same rules. It is a Guardian Knight. The sculpt's different, the artwork's different, but they can still play the game like anybody else.
And as we know, there's many Guardian Knights, so many possibilities. And I took that very literally. I was one of the lucky few who got that first Guardian Knight, and I was trying to play the Frozen Horror as written. I mean, the remake hadn't come out yet. And the Barbarian just kept getting killed. He kept getting killed. So it's like, fine, here's 2 Guardian Knights to help him out. Let's see if he can do it. And we had a great quest. And we played with 3 people who had never played HeroQuest before, and we had a great time. And a year later, we're in Quest 10 now. So,
great, awesome. That's awesome news.
So Lee asks also, and I feel like he kind of predicted some of the things that you guys would end up doing with the extra dice and the standalone hero releases. But his question, I'm going to kind of boil it down here. It's dealing with maybe the adjustments that are made. So I'm thinking of Rise of the Dread Moon. You gave us a helmet that now says it's made of metal, and we got the hand axe that, oh, by the way, the wizard can't use it. So is there ever going to be like a correction, like going back retroactively and like fine-tuning it in the game system box, if I'm trying to make that make sense?
Like some kind of FAQ, kind of errata kind of thing?
Yeah. Revised version 2.0.
I guess it would come down to, is that necessary for this level of fan community? Because again, Kurgan subscribers and fans of your material, we're talking about the hardcores for the most part, right? Is that really where the fans would want our attention to be? If I had to if I walked in on Monday and I said, okay, what are we doing for the next 2 months? Do the fans want us to break down a hardcore FAQ, check the boxes, errata everything we need to, or do they want a new product? They want a new game, they want a new hero collection. Like, that is a question we have to ask ourselves every day. We're ultimately a pretty small team in the grand scheme of things of the Hasbro ecosystem. We have finite resources. Where do the fans want our attention, right? Do they want the new, or are those fans capable of being like, oh yeah, like I noticed on this card they updated the terminology ever so slightly, that I can probably waterfall that down to an earlier card to make sure there's consistency in my game? It's a rhetorical question, right, for the fans, but just sharing the insight of, as we prioritize the team, where do we want to put the effort? I would believe that the fans are like, yeah, I got this. I know what it needs to be. I know what the right answer is. And even if I'm not sure, I'm just going to homebrew my own stuff anyway.
Yeah, whether you meant to say it or not, this is what works.
Exactly. I want a new quest pack. I want a Ragnar miniature. Like, you know? So I would believe that, you know, based on what I've heard, that's where they want our attention to be.
So you don't object to all these fan errata that's out there saying like...
Again, in a way, again, Hero Quest was originally designed and is still, you know, essentially structured on the idea of, you know, inserting yourself into the game and making it yours.
I like that. I think you used the term sandbox on the Discord.
Yes, well, that's the whole logic of the IP and the game mechanic in general. Is if you're looking for a game that is so structured that every every edge case is figured out, you know, like the rules are so prescriptive that every little detail has been prescribed and written out, that the story is so tight and structured in a way that it's just easy mode, just blurted out. It's just not Hero Quest, right? There's plenty of other games here.
Yeah, right.
But again, I think people love Hero Quest because you do get to put your own stamp on it. You know, you get to make it yours. And so for us, when fans are doing their own thing, yeah, that's why, you know, we kind of encourage it, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I really like, for me, that is what Hero Quest is all about. And I know that, like, if you ask two Hero Quest fans about how the crossbow should work, you get two different answers. So I know there's a lot of people out there that think the way I use the crossbow is completely wrong, but I like the way I do it, and when I play with somebody else, if they want to do it some other way, we just do it that way. I was kind of thinking back to your earlier comment about meetings, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but when I kind of jumped at Avalon Bill about the courage rules, was that a meeting?
Was that a meeting?
Okay, this just fan took it too far, but I don't think I was the only one.
I don't even remember how that played out. A lot of times it's so funny to just almost troll Doug on some of this stuff. Like walk in the morning and be like, Doug, did you see what they said on Discord? He's like, yeah, I saw it. I don't think I slept much last night, but my head's spinning. Can we like not talk about this till lunch? So unfortunately Doug's not here this week because he'd be another fun one to sit down with.
I'd love to talk to him.
But you know, we take it all seriously.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I was going to say we're very passionate. Sometimes it doesn't always come out the way we intend it to, but I think he had a good answer because at the end it was just like, okay, well, we can't agree, but you can do it however you want. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's 2 points here. There's definitely a lot of people that want to, I guess for lack of a better term, honor the intention, you know, what you guys wanted for the game. And there's also an acknowledgement, and Amalgamash says this all the time, and I'm right there with him, about we can always fix it ourselves. But we still expect you guys to make your best effort and make the most playable game you can, and I think you're doing that. You're not just like, oh, they can just fix it themselves, let's just dash something off.
It's a super fine line. Every time we do a reissue of, again, recognizing, is it broken, is it fun? I like the first two questions that we ask ourselves, and that leads into, do you honor the original? Do we interpret this as potentially a flawed mechanic? Is it a fun experience? Those all just become like all these little scales of decision making. And so if you almost picture it, and I'm going to date myself here, like a graphic equalizer, right? I mean, like, amp the fun, fix the mechanic a little bit, maybe it's not, we don't throw that out, but we tweak it. That tuning process is kind of, the team getting together and making those decisions. And yeah, we always have the fans first in mind to that whole process. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever make everybody happy, but we'll do our absolute best to try to take all the comments, all the history, honor what everybody thinks they want that game to be, try to put it out the best thing we can. That means that there'll always be somebody that disagrees with us. So I'm just hoping that's a couple people and not a lot of people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm thinking of the roll to move mechanic. I mean, it's become an internet meme. It's like, oh, you got to roll to move. What a dumb thing. And
Doug hates roll to move. It's like a personal trigger for him. That's why when we play test, we had started to introduce when there's not monsters present, you just move 8 spaces. It just speeds up the play testing so much. That's why we snuck it into the rules as an alternate rule.
I gotta say though, as much as at my table we try to do it, we always forget. So people end up rolling to move anyway. So it's so hard for us to break that nostalgic mechanic. But I think a lot of people are grateful that it's you're almost giving them permission to say, yeah, this is a good way to play too.
Yeah, because a lot of times in our play testing, people will want to optimize before opening a door, for example. That can be very, very clumsy when you're doing roll to move. But if it's just a flat movement, the players just take a moment. What's the order before we open the door? Who's standing where? It just cleans up the pace of the game very easily and gets you right back into the fun.
That's why Zargon draws an event card on his turn when there's no monsters, right? Anyway. Okay, very good, very good. Sorry, conscious of your time here, I'll try to go through these more quickly. Okay, tile packs. Oh, we already talked about monster packs. Furniture. Well, I noticed you did have the new furniture in Mage of the Mirror and the new furniture in Rise of the Dread Moon. So these extras, so to speak, these bonus pieces that you're putting into the boxes.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the conversation you asked about with some of the other ones about the incomplete nature of some of the quest packs. Mage didn't have quite the presence of Frozen Horror, right? We wanted to scale Mage to Frozen Horror. And
early reviews said the same thing, back in the 90s.
And so we had a few conversations, and I was like, look, at this point in the process for many players, they've kind of seen the same decorum for a while, and the narrative is that we're essentially on a different continent at this point, in a different land, in a different culture.
Yeah.
Give them a visual cue to that narrative by giving them a new set of furniture. And by doing that too, for some of the Zargons who love just cramming the entire dungeon map full of quests in their own homebrews, now you have plenty of furniture to flesh out a very, very complex map. And you got some variety. You can introduce some things here and there based on your own personal preferences. And so we started that process in Mage. We had at that point already knew, and we're already working on Rise. So based on what we did, we costed out essentially the first half of the furniture in Mage, and we knew full well we were gonna finish the set through Rise. And so by purchasing into both of them, you came away with a new set of furniture.
Very good, very good. And we shouldn't discount the value of that, because I was reading back, and I think this, again, Amalgamash, I'm gonna name drop him. He did a video where it's like, there were other tabletop introductory dungeon crawl in a box games before HeroQuest, but one of maybe the unique features of HeroQuest was we finally had the 3D furniture to go with the 3D figures for the characters.
And right before Mage, we had released Frozen Horror, and in Frozen Horror there was a new character sheet pad and new dice. So
you go through a lot of characters in that one, so for sure.
Yep. Well, part of it was, hey, if you're buying the system, then you just got a whole new set of character sheets and you just got new dice. A lot of people love their dice. We were talking about that earlier. And at this point, you've been resupplied with character sheets. Would we just put another set of dice and another character sheet in Mage? And I was like, that feels kind of overkill lame. Like, that's going to get tired fast. And it's going to be like, well, what am I going to do with these 8,000 character sheets? So that was part of the decision of like, let's mix it up, right? Let's offer something different. And that led to this conversation around furniture.
And I suppose this must be a cost thing. Why didn't you just have, oh, you go on Hasbro and I just want a pad of character sheets and that's it?
Yeah, well, again, that turns into a whole nightmare around distribution and, you know, minimum quantities.
Big pallets of character sheets being shipped.
Yeah, the order picking too. Like if we, you know, we've talked a few times about what are we capable of doing on something like Hasbro Pulse, you know? Could we a la carte certain things? And that becomes a whole logistical exercise for picking orders and distribution and boxing them. That's a lot of very technical problems that you know, just still have to be figured out at some point.
All right. Well, several of these questions you've already answered. You can't say anything about Against the Ogre Horde yet.
What? The what?
So that's no comment on that one. All right, let's see. Animal Companions. You've answered a lot of this already, but what was the single largest challenge to overcome when reviving HeroQuest in the first place? Interview number 2?
No, I would say when the decision was made, and I'm probably the wrong person to ask. It's actually probably Intergalactic Patrick, because
okay, get Patrick.
His labor of love was proving to leadership that the business model existed. Like proving that there was a white space in the market for a game like Heroes Quest to come back. That we could as a company like bring back these games, bring Avalon Hill back, you know, like function in the strategy gaming market. Patrick did all that legwork, all that proving, all that business model, crazy analytics, spreadsheets to your eyes cross. Like that was Patrick's hard work in the beginning of this process that proved the model. And basically they said, all right, we'll perform an experiment, Patrick. We're going to run a crowdfunding on Hasbro Pulse, and we're going to see who answers your call to arms, right? We're going to see what this community looks like. Go ahead, do your crowdfunding, right? We'll all gather around after we see how that data works. Fans did it. The fans proved the model. Patrick walked back in with all his swagger, you know, chest out, head held high, chin up. Hey, check out this crowdfunding on HeroQuest. This is a thing, everybody. And at that point, they were like, yup, let's bring it back. Let's bring back Avalon Hill. Let's bring this stuff back to retail. Let's go.
Well, we thank him for his good work.
Yep. So that is Patrick's big, giant, massive contribution.
Okay, I think I personally have asked you this before, and you really couldn't give an answer. Or Space Crusade, is it coming back?
So, I mean, for most of the fans at this point, I think you've all figured out. We have a great partnership with GW in bringing HeroQuest back, right? The reality of HeroQuest as a trademark, as an IP, as a brand, as a game. Unfortunately, over the years, who owned what kind of eroded into so many little pieces and parts and slices of the pie that it was almost impossible to bring HeroQuest, to issue HeroQuest. And I know there were a lot of other little Kickstarters and everything else that tried in certain ways with various levels of
SueQuest 25th anniversary.
Because it was all kind of chopped up. The leadership team at Hasbro did a great job our legal counsel did a great job working with GW, having the conversations, and basically recoalescing everything that needed to happen to put the HeroQuest brand back under Hasbro. As part of that, all the conversations we had with our partners at GW, they're really awesome people. We said, okay, well, in order to do this, what clear lines, do we have to define? And GW over the years since the reissue of HeroQuest have done an amazing job with games like Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar and everything else.
Warhammer Quest.
It's important to protect their IP. And so I know that some of the hardcore fans, they still want to use the word chaos in certain instances. I prefer the word dread for certain legal reasons, and it works out very well. And there were other elements of the IP that just made sense to do right by both parties. And those were really productive, good, solid conversations, and everybody was happy at the end of it. And it allowed us to bring HeroQuest back. Space Crusade's a lot harder. It is very, very hard to do that same process with what is in that box.
The Space Marines are so iconic.
Yes, very, very hard. And that puts a lot of speed bumps in that process. Will I say never? No. But the complexity of that exercise is probably 5 to 10 times what it was on HeroQuest.
So I suppose one of the steps will be really proving that there is a market for that.
So that's it. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, Space Crusade is so entrenched in the 40K IP. Is it even Space Crusade if you took it out? Is it just HeroQuest in space at that point, right? So that's a really
collaboration,
big mountain to climb, right? And again, like the GW team is amazing, and the legal teams are awesome. And it was, I mean, they did the hard work that brought HeroQuest back the way we did. But Space Crusade, that is a really, really complex conversation.
Okay, but never say never.
I'll never say never, but my head's spinning just attempting to answer the question. So
thank you for trying. Well, I had a great time over at the Warhammer booth playing Fireteam. I'd never played that before. And
yeah, Kill Team is a great game. I play Kill Team.
No, yeah, you said
yep.
Kill Team.
Team's a great
Fireteam is a different one.
I love playing that game. It's how I get everybody to understand how different you can use Games Workshop product miniatures in a very different, like much more intimate setting with Kill Team, where it's very broad stroke, big dramatic moments in 40K.
You care about the individual soldiers; they're not just cannon fodder. Really
overthinking like your line of sight kind of angles and things like that on Kill Team. It's a very different game. It's a lot of fun. I love that game.
Yeah, and I also got to try Space Hulk. I'd never played that one either.
Space Hulk is my game in that I was 8 years old. I was not a gamer. Besides, like, the essentially the dawn of video games, I had a Risk. My father had the 1976 Risk that we played. We played Stratego. We played Mastermind as kids, but no actual real in-depth strategy or wargaming. And there were a couple kids who were a couple years older than me in the neighborhood, and I hung out with them. Went to the basement. They had a Space Hulk copy, and I was hooked. That game like changed my life, and I ended up owning first edition Rogue Trader 1/4000. I still own my book. The binding has since deteriorated into nothing, and it's in a 3-ring binder now. I used to have to travel to all these random hobby shops that sold like model airplanes to find Warhammer miniatures. But I have been a lifelong Games Workshop consumer ever since. Space Hulk was that game. and it really put me on the trajectory. Like even trying to figure out what I was going to do in a career, I really endeared myself to Dragon Magazine, White Dwarf, the box art on things like Space Hulk. I would copy the art. I would sit there with my own sketchbook, and I would duplicate all that crazy kind of heavy metal magazine style material. I would rip it out of the magazines and tack it to the walls of my bedroom, and that process ultimately led me to decide to become an artist. You know, I majored in art in high school, went on to become a fine artist with a fine arts degree from college. That's ultimately led me into a field in graphic design and illustration. That's how I ended up at Hasbro. As you can tell, been a gamer since I was 8 years old at Space Hulk. It's all come together under Avalon Hill now. So it's been a wild ride.
Beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. And we're coming to the end here, but just some quick ones. The HeroQuest card game. I guess it kind of just appeared out of nowhere, and now it's selling for a lot of money. And from what I've heard, it like leaves ink stains on your hands. I don't know much about it. There's stickers for the dice. Is that coming back in some other form? Because apparently people want it, or maybe it's an oddity. I don't know.
I'll just say we've talked about it. We've talked about it. Yeah, that might be one of the fun things that maybe we just bury into the superfan lore to debate for the next 40 years, or you see it at Target in a couple of years. Who knows?
Well, you're probably aware there is a certain fan who de-evolved it into classic HeroQuest, the card game, with like the old artwork.
Yep. So who knows what that'll become, but that's a super funny one. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Thank you so much for your time here. Okay, well, that one's already answered. Advanced HeroQuest. What would you say about that game?
Again, that probably falls into the same category as Space Crusade, in that with the amount of Skavens that are in there, a lot of old world references. Again, that's a very complex conversation about extracting the IP out of it, and is it still Advanced HeroQuest?
I'm not a big D&D historian, but I'm recalling something about Dungeons & Dragons having like hobbits, and then they had to change it to halflings, so maybe something like that.
I don't remember. I mean, was there a halfling in Advanced HeroQuest? I mean, it's still like...
No, I mean the way Dungeons & Dragons had to change things because it was too close to Lord of the Rings.
Again, like you saw it with the... We're going to replace a certain strange-looking lizard creature with abominations,
yeah.
Right? For reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, again, we can go through a process. Is it still Advanced HeroQuest at that point?
Yeah.
You know?
Or what if Games Workshop came out with a Warhammer Quest, I don't know, that was just really, really nostalgic for HeroQuest without treading on that agreement that was made? But I guess that's not something we can predict, is it?
I don't know. I would love to know more about what all GW stuff, if nothing else, is just a geeky fan who wants to own it all. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Advanced HeroQuest probably falls into the same category as Space Crusade in terms of what we can do right by both parties, right?
Battle Masters.
Ha! Battle Masters. It's another one. It's really fun. There's a lot of Chaos Warriors in Battle Masters.
Well, that's true. Chaos Archers.
But I think it's funny that it's like essentially a giant twister mat. But it's a fun game. It's got some pace. It's got a good pace to it.
It definitely does. Those units die fast. Now, you've probably seen this, but Jacer, Warbuilder 22J, he actually recreated a couple of the battles, the like cutscene battles from HeroQuest in Battle Masters. Yeah, so he had huge armies.
Everybody's trying to almost make it like the multiverse logic of like it's all interconnected, and therefore you should be able to move between game systems and platforms and mechanics in worlds to like move in and out of story. Yeah, I've been watching you guys do that. It's super funny to pay attention to.
Okay, what about Legacy of Sorasil for the PC, Amiga PC 1994?
I haven't probably delved enough deep into that one for you guys to give a good answer.
That's kind of an obscure one even for me. Like, I've just learned about it from other people mostly. Let's see. Oh yeah, and is there another, well, I guess we just had the Nightfall as the online quest. Will there be other online quests for like Return of the Witch Lord or Mage of the Mirror in the future?
That might go back to the conversation we were talking about where the priority would be. Again,
yeah,
those online quests serve marketing purposes too, right? It helps elevate conversation, buzz, help kind of promote awareness, things like that. If something else is coming down the pipeline, where are you putting the effort? To go back to Mage of the Mirror to, again, potentially fill in a narrative gap that we've intentionally left, or to promote the next thing that's coming down the pipeline.
So maybe that's for us to create those adventures.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I would love to do an interview with the guys who did the app. I'd love to talk to Patrick, Doug, but I really appreciated you taking the time for this almost hour and a half with me here.
I mean, unfortunately, again, Doug's not here. We should talk to Patrick before the end of the weekend. Maybe he can provide some insights into what happened on day 0 to get Hero Quest to a crowdfunding campaign. He was boots on the ground. He was firsthand knowledge. That might be a great interview to focus on with him. That'd be awesome.
That'd be great. Well, and I did just want to comment. I mean, I'll pick this interview apart later, but what you were saying about Games Workshop, I think it hadn't really dawned on me to think about it in that way, that we should actually thank them for their part in getting Hero Quest to come out, rather than, I think there are some fans who have this kind of negative perception that, well, somehow they were dragging their feet, or somehow they were an obstacle, or they were reluctant to do it.
No, they have been.
But it's the opposite.
They have been, opposite. I mean, I spent 15 years on the Action Brand side of the Hasbro toy business before I took over the development lead on Avalon Hill. I worked at a lot of partners, Lucasfilm, Marvel, Blizzard, Activision. I come from the sporting goods industry before I worked at Hasbro. I know the NFL, NBA, NHL. I can tell you, like, partnering with GW, they are awesome, like best in class. So I think they get an unfair shake from the community sometimes, but they're great people and they're awesome to work with.
Very good. Well, I've had a very positive experience at Gen Con too, with them. So great. All right. Well, thanks again for your time.
Great. Thanks, man.
All right. So that was Chris Nadeau. We did our interview, and we'll see what else we can do today.